Good afternoon, everyone. It's Glitcher, aka Mr. Letter by Letter. I'm back for the first time in a long time. It's been a long time since the last review. It is no surprise that I have a tendency to upload and then forgore, but it's been around 2 months since the last review. There's been some background changes, as you can tell, but we're not here to talk about that. We're here to get into the new book we're reviewing today. The new book I want to talk about today is none other than Cassandra Clare's Swordcatcher. So this right here that I have is the Barnes & Noble First Day Release Exclusive Edition. I bought this, I believe, the day of its release or the weekend of its release, and I didn't read it. I didn't read it for a long time. And it was sitting on my shelf for a long time, and then for a while there, after it dropped in 2024 when I moved out, I decided to pick the pen up and, pick the book up and give it a shot. I got about halfway through. I got to chapter 15 out of like 20 something there is. And I just stopped reading. Not that I didn't enjoy it, just didn't read it. But I decided to revisit it after creating the channel and deciding I needed a new book to review. And after I finished it, I didn't realize this would be a series. I thought this was going to be a standalone novel. Clearly, I was mistaken. So this is the first book in what is going to be apparently a trilogy. If we go ahead and take a look here, you'll be able to see that there is a bunch of books here. There's going to be the Swordcatcher that was dropped in October. There is the Ragpicker King that dropped this past spring, I believe is when it dropped. And you have the Bone Collector, the Bone Conjurers, rather, which is the third installment that is going to release a little bit later on this year, excuse me. So we have a lot to go over. This is not a short book. This is a 600 plus page extravaganza. 624 pages on this version specifically. And it follows the story of two individuals. It follows the story of Kel, who has a different last name depending on who you ask. His first name is honestly not used, and we'll get into that. Or his old last name is not previously used, and he has a new last name that he's given. His name in the book predominantly is going to be Kel Anjuman, but we'll get to that later. And the other character, Lynn Castor. So let's start with Lynn, because Lynn is going to be, while not the main crux of this, there is two characters here. There's really three, and we'll get into like the third side character here, or the first, like the number one side character here very clearly, and we'll get to that when we get to that. So let's start with Lynn. So Lynn is one of these group of people known as the Ashkar, which is a small community who possess magical abilities. But due to the law of the land that they live in, called Castellan, sorry, they because they are magic beings, they are separated. So they live in a separate place called the Salt, but they are allowed to venture into the city. They're allowed to venture out to the city if you're someone like a physician and things like that. If you're a council and things of that nature. Ashkar have small magical abilities, nothing more than that, because in this world of Castellan, which we'll get to, there is no magic. So the other character this focuses on is Kel Anjuman. He is an orphan who, in the epilogue of the book, gets brought in to be the body double of the royal heir to the Castellan throne, to House Aurelian, which we'll get to. His name, the prince's name, is named Connor, and because they look similar, he was basically taken from this orphan to become the Kirklikar, is what it's called, which means sword catcher, which means he'll be his body double and he'll always be by his side. And if an attempt were to come onto Kel's life, or onto Connor's life, it is Kel's duty to step in front of the arrow, the blade, the whatever. So that is his duty to die. Now, if neither of them die, or if Kel doesn't die, then he still ends up in service to him when he becomes king. But we'll get to that later. So these two have separate storylines almost entirely throughout this novel. Not entirely throughout this novel. That's incorrect. Throughout the first portion of this novel, and then they have a run-in in which someone tries to assassinate the prince, but they fail. And so Lynn is brought into the castle to heal Kel, because it was Kel that was attacked and not the prince. That's who the assassination attempt was on. And so because of this, they're both in a unique position in their own lives. And so this kind of follows the story about these two end up meeting and end up connecting together alongside the prince, and all of their connection to the underworld of this land called Castellan. So Castellan is the city in which they're in. The Chronicles of Castellan is this city, this town that they're in, this kind of country, I guess, so to say, that they're in. And their goal, and they are like they're a noble, and they're a trader, and they have all these other nations that they have to befriend and things like that. It's very much like it's a high fantasy political romance book. It's a high fantasy political romance book. That's kind of how I kind of see it. The politics in this run pretty deep, actually. So if you don't have a general understanding of politics, you will struggle to understand this book. There is this land, and it was once a land full of magic, and then something called the Sundering happened, in which magic was gone. And hence, the Ashkar are the only people who still have any form of magic. So that's kind of like the lore of the land that we're set up in. So there's three characters we're going to focus on here: Kel, Lynn, and Connor. Connor's the prince. And I want to start with Connor and how we're going to deep dive into characters and things like that. So Connor is not someone you get too much insight into. Really, you get, people's opinions on, but there's one thing you have to keep into note. You never get Connor's point of view. He is around often, and you'll see him often, but you will never get his point of view, like you will on, for example, any of these books I'm going to pop up on screen. That all do multiple books that have, predominantly side characters having a primary voice that you read and understand the perspective of. You only have two POVs this entire time. You have Kel's and Lynn's. But Connor is the tie to both, because Connor and Lynn are kind of in this romantic kind of twist and turn where they love-hate each other, or hate-love each other, something like that. And Kel and Lynn are combined in the sense that they both are doing work for the Rag Picker King. More on that later. And then lastly, as we know, Kel and Connor are combined because Kel was raised with Connor and he is the sword catcher for him. So now you understand the triangle that's here. So they're all connected to each other, with Connor very clearly being the side piece to the story, or rather to the narration. Because of the story, he is central. He is critical. And that's why he is, the intertwining of this is very, very important. So I'm going to give you a summation, basically. This book follows a bunch of rowdy 20-year-olds who are, at least on the Kel and Connor side mostly, this follows a bunch of rowdy 20-year-olds who are all rich nobles who will go out, party, drink, sex, all this stuff, right? And until one day, Kel gets a visit from the Rag Picker King. Now, the Rag Picker King is basically the king of the underworld. He is basically the kind of the lord criminal of the place, and he does have a name that he's referred to as. His name is Andrean, is from what I can understand. So because of this visiting, Kel is asked to work for the Rag Picker King, in which he refuses, and then they go about their times until Kel is nearly assassinated because Kel goes out in Connor's clothing. Then the failed assassination when they realize, oh, that's not the prince. You're someone else. they all run, and he goes to the back of the palace, or is carried to the back of the palace, I should say, by Gian, which you'll learn who that is later on. And he is healed by Lynn after her grandfather brings her up. So one important thing to connect is the reason that Lynn and Kel meet at all is because they're injured and because the advisor of the king, the general counsel, I guess you could say, of the king or of the house generally, is a man named Maesh Besseman, and Maesh is Lynn's grandfather. He is the most powerful Ashkar in terms of politics, as well as mostly in terms of magic as well, that we know of at this point. And so he brings Lynn to come up and save him because he knows that Lynn is goated at the medicine. So he saves him, right? And that's where this kind of line kind of intercedes and intersects. This is where Lynn and Connor meet for the first time. And then on the Lynn side, before we get to them all kind of coming together, Lynn, is just a healer who wants to get access to these books in order to heal her best friend who's suffering from a ailing disease that no one can cure. So she wants to get a hold of these books in order to kind of learn and see if there's anything that can be done that she doesn't have access to because she is a woman. And that's something that this land is very clear on. There is very clear classism and sexism. The Ashkari community, a world of mostly sexism, and then Castelline, the major city people, a world full of classism. So those are the kind of two big things that are plaguing the city. She ends up getting to also meet before the Ragpicker King. And the Ragpicker King doesn't have an end goal like he does with Kel. For Lynn, he wants her to be a good physician. But he wants her to work for him and use his space, which is a thing that ends up happening in the long run, of course, as we know. And then all of a sudden, she's woken up in the night to come heal Kel. So Lynn's story is primarily moderate up until this point. When they meet is when you get a lot more of Lynn's relevance to the story, because Kel is still the primary main character at this point. This is where it doesn't necessarily switch, but it has its changes. Right, so once again, after he heals them, this is where Lynn and Connor meet, and those two clash heavy. They clash heavy, Lynn doesn't like the prince doesn't really like her, but they both think they're hot. So you get this kind of sexual tension that kind of builds throughout the time. And there's so much that happens. I don't want to spoil everything, but that is how they meet together. Eventually, there does come a point where, there are multiple, re-encounters. Lynn does end up healing Connor at one point from injury. Both Lynn and Kel end up diving into the maze together. They learn about this other party. I learned about this other player in the underworld, and Backpacker King wants him gone because he doesn't adhere to the rules, so to say. There is a lot that goes into this book. There's so many twisting and winding storylines that make this book very hard to keep up with if you aren't used to reading. If you aren't a practiced reader, I would not pick up this book. Even though this is a great book, and we're going to get to my rating here in a second. This is a great book and not a book I would have most people who are not practiced in reading pick up. Switching perspectives is not the most challenging thing in the world, but you have to remember there's multiple mini storylines you have to keep track of, and the slew of side characters outside of just Connor is crazy. King, Queen, the maid, the bar people, all the other nobles. It is a lot to keep track of, but unlike in other books where you think, there might not be, it's very relevant for you to read and understand who is who. Like I said, this is a hard book to understand if you do not understand the concept of politics. And that's where I think this book is going to lose a lot of people, because it is confusing. We're going to take a look at some of the reviews for this. And you can see my review here, 4 stars. I'm going to get into why I reviewed it 4 stars in a minute. But one of the consistent things that people struggle with this book, you're going to see, is if you read all these, lengthy, detailed reviews on Goodreads, is this. This is my favorite passage, and this is why I selected this one. Most of my critiques boil down to need a few more rounds of editing to remove unnecessary material, to clarify the driving force of the story, to flesh out the character interactions that already have potential. But this is not meant to be a diss, because he says very clearly, the writing and pacing are so polished that all the novel needs is to be clearer and more concise. I enjoyed Swordcatcher, but I think it's a little too diluted and directionless as current form to reach the greatness its premise is capable of achieving. That this book is fantastic as a premise, but there's so much faff, and this is what I understand. And one thing to keep in mind is that this is not new. For anyone who is reading this, who hasn't read this yet because it's not part of the Cassandra Clare lore, and what I mean by that is, we're going to go ahead and show you guys. For people who are used to reading Cassandra Clare books, something that you need to keep in mind is that she has always written from a convoluted perspective for many, 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 many years. And it goes all the way back. We're going to skip all this. It goes here, the first three, that were published. We got the last three as well. You know, the double trilogy right here, the Mortal Instruments. And, you know, when she doubles back, she comes right back up here. And you're like, oh, this is just a cool prequel to some character. This gets complicated. And there's a reason why you saw a bunch of these books on screen earlier, specifically in The Last Hours, specifically in Dark Artifices. The reason I showed those books on screen is because they are convoluted. She's used to writing from multiple perspectives, bringing all these storylines together, and it doesn't always result in an amazing picture. And so when I say that, you know, this requires clarification, she kind of brought the habits of her old reading, of her old books into this. Now, don't get me wrong, I love the Shadowhunter books. I'm probably going to do a review of every Shadowhunter book. That's probably going to happen. I own all of them. But with Swordcatcher, you know, first off, one thing you have to keep in mind, this book is not going to have a cult following by default. And the reason it's not going to is because of the audience. This is the first time she delves away from young adult fantasy and she goes directly into adult fantasy. It's the first time she's done this in a long time. You know, originally you had the Shadowhunter, Chronicles. You have the book she co-wrote with Holly Black, the what's it called? I'm going to look right here. The Magisterium series, meant for young readers, not young adults, young readers in general. And so this is her first kind of delving into, we're going all the way adult. And one thing you have to realize when you write adult novels is that they are not built, fundamentally, they are not built hardcore specified fandom. Adult readers do not. The reason that adult books hit and why series of adult books often don't hit is because adults, when they're marketed towards adults, and books are marketed towards adults, series perform drastically worse. Unless they are like a level of popularity that could be read across all ages. You know, things like it's about a wider age range. This could be that, but this is not going to be ACOTAR. You know, this is not going to be that. And I use Sarah J. Maas as an example because they are friends, and Sarah J. Maas, I believe, and Cassandra Clare have been friends for a good amount of time. This is not going to be, you know, Leah Bardu. This is not going to be Hellbent in Ninth House, right? This is adult books for the most part are duologies if they are a series. And the what I point to is not even all the way adult; it's young adult too. But like, I think Chloe Gong does really good job in playing in that space. But you know, when you write series, it forces adults to have to, and when they're this intricate, because not all series are bad, but when they're this intricate, pay attention to so much, and it's almost like you don't even want to read this book because you'll read this book. And then if you're reading this before Ragpicker King comes out, when you read it when I bought it, because I didn't read it when I bought it, because I have that bad habit, you're waiting around, to be fair, I came out with the second book pretty quickly. Well, not pretty quickly. It was over a year. So, you know, a year and change until Ragpicker King came out. I don't know how much of this you're always, like, remembering down to this is a book you need to remember down to the details. And that's why this book is one of the ones where I'm like, oh, this is one of them ones where, like, if you're not like tapped in, you don't know, and that's fine. But people don't understand that all the way, and I feel like that is going to be a reason why this book doesn't perform as well. Once again, we're going to go back to looking at the Goodreads page, and we're going to go ahead and look at the Google page here in a second. So let's go ahead and pull this up. So Swordcatcher by Cassandra Clare rates at a 3.82, which once again is not terrible. But when you look at that, a 3.82, which is pretty good, you want to look at mostly 3-star reviews. And a lot of times they're most of the time barely making the cut. And I do not hate this book. It is a 4-star book. But if we're getting into the details, the amount of inspiration she's pulling from, she's wearing them hard on her sleeve, which is a little strange this deep into her career. But also, you could say that makes sense in a way. You know, you're wearing all these influences on your sleeve because she's only written a couple of things. And you're not wrong. You're not wrong. She has not written that many books. You know, like, this is her first divergence from the Shadowhunter series in ages. You need to understand how long this has been going on for. The Shadowhunter Chronicles started so long ago. Genuinely so long ago. And that brings me to my final, like, actual good thoughts about this. We're going to go ahead and pull this up. So Swordcatcher on Google generally, 3.8 out of 5 on Goodreads. Google 94% of users like this book. Let me go ahead and get to the good things now, because I've ranted a lot about the things that this book does wrong, but I want to rant about the things it does right finally. And it does 2 things really well. One thing that was really well done was the world building. The world building in this book, which, by the way, Cassandra Clare's weakness in the Shadowhunter books, with the exception of the Infernal Devices, is the world building is not good. Or not that it's not good. It's not as up to scratch as the other parts of the Shadowhunter Chronicles, aside from the Infernal Devices. This? It's phenomenal. The world building is lush. I feel, even in just a prologue itself. We're gonna go ahead and take an excerpt right now. He was not a man who liked to wait or was often made to do it. He glanced behind him, where the narrow path cut into the cliffside fell away to the sea. He always thought of this as an odd place for an orphanage. The cliffs that rose above Castellan's northern bay were jagged, dotted with scars like the face of a pox survivor, and dusted with a thin layer of loose, gravelly scree. The words she uses are genuinely really good. That's just one sentence. We could get into what, the Caraval, the descriptions of Caraval, descriptions of the castle, descriptions of the salt, descriptions of the maze. The world building in this is phenomenal. And the other thing she does really well, while this is a slight against it, it's also a power move for it, because if you are a practiced reader, this book kicks ass. And that's why this is a 4-star book, in my opinion. This book kicks ass if you are a practiced reader, which I very much am. The amount of detail I have to, it forces me to not be a passive reader. Do you understand how easy that is for me nowadays? When I can grab, I don't know, let me think of a book that I don't love that much. I can't think of it right now, but I'll put it right here. Random ass book that I don't love too much. I'm gonna just not pay attention, but it forces you to. It locks you, because all of a sudden you miss a couple details. You gotta go back. I had to reread at least 10 pages of this just to make sure I understood things. And lastly, it really makes you feel the politics. The choices that Lynn and Kel are put into in their positions, you feel them. And oftentimes, this might just be me, they behave in the way that I would behave. That makes this book really easy to like. And just a fantastic read. Overall, I could not be more pleased with those aspects. Is there slights against it for a new reader? Absolutely. If you are a new reader and you aren't used to reading and you see this and you pick this up, you might think, oh, this is a lot. It's very confusing. Yeah, it is. But if you're a practice reader and you pick this up, your first thought is going to be, oh, there's a lot to chew through. And now, could it have gone with some editing? Absolutely. Could there have been about 50 pages of faff cut out? Absolutely, there could have been. But for me, I'm glad that they weren't. Because it forces me to dive deeper in on details and learn more about characters that may or may not be relevant. And if they don't end up being, then that'll be a slight. But for now, because this is the first book in this series, I'm very optimistic for the Ragpicker King. I don't own a copy yet. I will be purchasing a copy later on this year, and you will get that review most likely before the end of the year because of the third book's release. I do want to put out in time for in like a relevant timing for when it is scheduled to come out. It gets 4 stars for me. Simple as that. It just gets 4 stars. Yeah. Thank you for watching. I know this is haphazard, scattered. I like the reviews to be this way. I like the ranting. They will be more polished in the future eventually, but I like kind of just yapping into the camera. So with that, take care. Also, next review will be coming out. And also, let me comment down below if you want me to do more series reviews where I'm doing books back to back to back and then a final series at the end. That is what we're going to be trying with the next read. The next books you're going to hear me review are classic books. We're going to be doing a couple, not classic as in like American classic, but classics to me. From classic authors to me. We're gonna do a trilogy, and we're gonna review each book. And after I review them, we're gonna go through, and I want you, the people, to tell me, is it better that way? I will also make them more scripted, more written out, so that way you guys can tell me how you feel. But for now, that's all from me. Thank you very much, and I hope you guys have a good rest of your day. Cheers.